views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
The views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the participants and do not reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
BronxNet. Your voice, your views, your vision.
Good evening and welcome to Bronxtalk. Tonight we continue our series of Bronx political debates with the 78th Assembly District, which includes the Bronx neighborhoods of Fordham, Kingsbridge, Bedford Park, Crotona, and Belmont, and others as well. The Democratic primary features incumbent Jose Rivera, who has held the seat for more than a dozen years, and challenger Fernando Tirado. Unfortunately, we are once again, for the third consecutive time as a matter of fact, only able to present one of the two candidates because in this case, Mr. Rivera has chosen not to be here. He was invited via email on August 7th and then via certified mail, both of which were followed up with numerous phone calls to his office. He never responded. We asked to confirm his participation by Friday morning at 10 o'clock. He did not respond. Then after 3 p.m. on Friday, we finally got an email from Mr. Rivera's office saying he received notice of tonight's program too late and that he had a conflicting appointment tonight. I responded to that email offering to change the time of the recording of tonight's program, ready to pre-record it to fit his schedule. But neither he nor anyone from his office responded. We have to conclude it's clear that Mr. Rivera had no real intention of being here tonight. He had every opportunity to do so. So like we have done for Charles Rangel, Fernando Cabrera this year, and Hector Ramirez and Pedro Espada Jr. and others in the past, Assemblyman Jose Rivera will be represented tonight by an empty chair. It's something we absolutely abhor doing, but we dislike the insult to the democratic process and to Bronx voters even more. We don't take phone calls during debates, but you can send us comments via email to bronxtalk@bronxnet.org or on our Facebook page, and we'll read those on the air during a future edition of our program. Now, we turn our attention to a former district manager of Community Board 7, Fernando Tirado, who is a candidate for Assembly in the 78th Assembly District. Mr. Tirado, good evening. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Gary. Appreciate it very much. Hello, everyone.
It is great to have you. Before we get into you and your campaign, your thoughts on Mr. Rivera not being here and the fact that we have an empty chair.
I would have liked the opportunity to have debated him. I would have wanted to ask him certain questions, but unfortunately, I can't do that at this time. So I'm happy to show to the residents of the 78th District that why you should vote for me.
You brought it up. What would be a question you would ask him if he were seated here tonight?
I would ask him how, for instance, if we are in one of the most powerful, economically speaking, areas in the Bronx. We have the Fordham Road bid, which is the largest bid in the Bronx and the third largest in the city. We have all these opportunities for tourism, for new development, for new jobs. Where has his support been over the last dozen years or so?
Mm-hmm. What's your? I guess we've tapped into it. My first question on that would be your analysis of his long decades of service as an assemblyman and as a city councilman as well.
So I don't want to go into his terms of service so much. I know that there are plenty of people who have their own opinion as to what he has and hasn't done for the 78th District. I think that there's a gap that has been there for quite a while, and I felt that it was time that I should do something about it rather than sit back and and watch the situation continue unchallenged.
Why do you think you would be a better selection than he would be? He has many years of service and has many friends in the Assembly, certainly many colleagues in Bronx politics that like and support him and are supporting him now. Why do you think you'd be a better choice?
Well, I think I have a better repertoire with folks in the district. I think that there are a lot of people who know what I have brought to the table in the past and what I can bring to the table in the future if I were the Assemblyman. I have a lot of support from different constituents, from Belmont to Bedford Park, from Southern Boulevard to Kingsbridge Heights. And I think that the growing chorus of people who are supporting me is getting louder and louder.
In the Norwood News, David Cruz recounted that Mr. Rivera's office declined to meet with you when you were district manager, claiming they wanted political support in exchange. Is this actually true? Did that actually happen?
Not so much in that sense. I had tried to establish a relationship, tried to meet him at his office, and in the almost 5 years that I was a district manager, had not ever been able to meet with the Assemblyman once.
One more question about him, and then let's talk
Sure.
specifically about you. You're the one who's here. He's not here. There was that YouTube video that I think was disturbing to just about everybody who saw it, shot
Yes.
in 2005, showing Mr. Rivera making inappropriate comments to a woman during one of his visits to the Dominican Republic. Is that really a significant thing? I mean, we've heard about it. People have talked about it. It's been written up.
Yeah.
Or is it just one of those unfortunate moments the camera happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time?
Well, one, it was his camera, and it was his video that he posted up. As I
He
said
posted
before,
it up.
Yes. As I said before, it's a regrettable issue. I don't think that it's going to affect what's going on here. I think that there are real problems and real issues in the district that are on people's minds. And while, again, it may be distasteful for what he did, I'm not going to use that as a campaign issue.
Okay. Talking about the district a little bit, in that same article in the Norwood News, it was reported that voter turnout in the 78th Assembly District is historically low. Why do you think that is?
I think people don't feel that there's any hope. I think that people feel that nothing is going to change, that there hasn't been anyone to step up to the plate, and there hasn't been a need because people feel hopeless. Obviously, the opposite is true. People need to exercise their civic duty. They need to be a part of the process. But who has come up? There have been a few people, a few challengers, and it's something that needs to be pushed. You can't allow somebody to run unchallenged when they don't produce.
Mm-hmm. How do you bring hope? How do you bring hope to the district? How do you turn it around so that people feel empowered to wake up on primary day and walk to the polls and say, I want to vote for so and so?
Well, you got to let them know that that there's going to be someone who is going to be there when it comes to job creation and economic development and tackling issues like educating our kids and housing issues and environmental issues. You have to let them know that there is somebody who cares, somebody who knows what he's doing, somebody who's done these things before, and somebody who's going to bring some solutions to the table.
Let's talk a little bit about you and your background. One thing certainly that has come up, you were a longtime district manager in Community Board 7. Your exit from Community Board 7 was somewhat tumultuous. There were charges that you had stepped outside the boundaries of your position, commenting to the media. That sort of thing in Albany would get you ostracized in a second. If you say something and something over the head of your colleagues, or certainly as, let's say, a freshman, you say something that Speaker Silver doesn't like, all of a sudden we have an assemblyman who can't be effective because he's, for want of a better, ostracized, or for want of a better term, out of control. What's your thought about people who would say, well, we had a little problem there, are we going to have this problem in Albany?
So none of those accusations were found to be true. There were a lot of people who made things up with regards to those accusations, and I stand by my word. I have done the right thing all the time. If I've spoken to the media, it's because I've spoken to the media with people knowing that I was speaking to the media. If I defended an issue, it's because there was something that I had to defend it against. I'm proud of my record serving on the community board, and I would not change anything that I have done. one thing that I wasn't going to do is allow people to use that position to continue to put my family uneasy, to see them slander my name, and then my kids are asking me what's going on. My wife is asking me what's going on. Not for that. I have always tried to be someone who is who stands up for what's right, stands up to do the right thing for people and by people, and no one can challenge me on that.
What did you do well as district manager that you would like people of the 78th Assembly District to know about?
I was out there. I was not somebody who was sitting behind a desk. I was not out there someone who kowtowed to things that when I thought that they were wrong. I challenged issues. I challenged people to fight for the right thing. I've actually been accused of being too much on the straight and narrow as my position as district manager. And you know what? I would take that accusation every day. If what bothers you the most is that I'm operating above the board and in an open and transparent fashion, then I'm not going to stand down for that.
What sort of assemblyman would you be, whether you contrast to Mr. Rivera or just on your own? I'm assuming you visualized how this would work. What sort of assemblyman would you be?
I would be one that leads from the front, as opposed to leading from behind or leading from somewhere above. I want to have a great relationship with my constituents. I want to be able to hear their needs and be able to tackle their needs, and then look at the bigger picture. What can the state do to help people with education, with getting a job, with opportunities that exist in other counties and we're not bringing it here? Perfect example. It wasn't until Bronx Day in Albany of this year that I found out that there was an incentive program for people to hire folks who had been in the criminal justice system, and that there are tax breaks for businesses out there. Nobody in the audience knew that information was out there. And here we have a chance to provide people with jobs. Here we have a chance to provide people to turn their lives around, and the legislation is quiet. I mean, the chair of that committee was dumbfounded that we didn't know.
And I'm assuming you're, in essence, blaming the current elected officials for saying, hey, here's opportunities, but because of your inactivity, these things didn't happen.
Yes.
I said it for you, so there you go. You talk about being constituent-friendly, being out there in the neighborhood. What do you hear from people in the district, whether about their representation or about what they want to see and hear from Albany?
I think, again, people don't feel like they have representation. I think that when I speak to people, they feel that nothing's getting done, that nothing is progressing forward. And I've always told people, and most of the people that I've spoken with in the district agree, there's the old saying that if you're not on the table, you're on the menu. Well, when it comes to legislating and when it comes to representing the public, if our elected officials are not at the table, we're on the menu. And it's something that we need to change.
Let's talk about a couple of specific projects. The largest project in the district, certainly, and the largest project maybe in the Bronx ever, just about, is the Kingsbridge National Ice Center, ready to move into the Armory. Do you believe the current business people in the Kingsbridge Merchants Association, which you've been very active in supporting, are going to benefit or be hurt with their rents being raised, or even some of them losing their businesses through this process of developing that project?
So we anticipated, and I've spoken with the merchants before I even decided to run, that there were going to be issues with increasing rents, with the planning that hadn't happened alongside the CBA, alongside the more merchant input. I think that there are things that we can get behind, such as the Small Business Jobs Survival Act, which Councilwoman Palmer is looking to push forward. Well, I think we should look at how we could implement that on a statewide level. Mm-hmm. How can we do other things to provide incentives for property owners to keep the tenants that they have, sort of like a neighborhood stabilization type of program. Those are the things that are going to keep businesses. The ICE Center is going to cater to visitors, but the surrounding businesses are going to continue to cater to the neighborhood. And if we push out those businesses, the local residents won't have any place to go.
Although I would assume that some of those businesses would be thrilled to have some of the visitors also stop in, because
Sure.
then not only are we recycling Bronx money, but we're bringing money in from the outside.
And we need to do as much as we can to bring money from the outside into our borough and to different communities. It can't all be in one community. I agree with you on that. I think that we really need to take a hard look at what can be done to protect merchants, to allow property owners the right to develop, and to attract tourism and to meet all needs. But we need to really sit down and have a thoughtful planning process involved. I've proposed one to the community board and to the merchants with a rezoning similar to what we did on Webster Avenue and in Norwood. If we choose to rezone and we allow development to happen in concentrated areas and protect or do neighborhood development in other areas, I think that we can strike the right mix.
Has the dialogue been above board and friendly, or has having this dialogue with, whether it be the developers, the community board, with CARA, with the K-NIC partners, been a strained one, or has it not really happened yet?
I think the assumption that the CBA was
CBA, for people who don't know, is the community benefits agreement that was crafted to benefit the community during the process and after the process, putting the armory there. I just wanted to clarify.
Sure, not a
that.
problem. I think the community benefits agreement is not the end-all and be-all of what needs to happen on Kingsbridge Road. We need to have economic investment. We need to have legislation that's going to allow growth and allow mom-and-pop shops to continue to exist on the strip. And we need to use every resource possible, and whether that's city resources or state resources, to bring into that strip and help development. Now, Kingsbridge Road is not the only area that this should be happening on, but definitely it needs to happen on Kingsbridge Road.
I guess it's the most immediate and most obvious. Certainly you can go down the block and see Fordham Road and take a look at that as well. Before I move on to other topics, a large part of your background is in small business and small business development. Aside from the presence of the oncoming or incoming presence of the Armory, what do small businesses need, even throughout the 78th Assembly District, that they have not gotten so far?
I think more small businesses need the opportunity to grow. They need opportunity for access to capital. They need better banking options that will lend to minorities and women-owned businesses. And unfortunately, that's something else that doesn't exist in the 78th District.
How do you do that? How do you do that? I mean, everybody says, sure, let's make capital available, let's bring in new banks or things, but how do you do that? As an assemblyman, how would you do that?
So the first thing I would do is try to make at least zip code 10458 north of Kingsbridge Road all the way up to the top of the border a banking development district. After several years where they had not had one development district, they restarted the process. And it brings in funding from banks and other state resources so that they do lend to low-income businesses or homeowners or working-class homeowners. I think when you get that infusion of cash and that infusion of development into a neighborhood, things start to change and things start to prosper. Now, if you did it on 10458, we're talking corridors that have been recently rezoned and not had the infusion of capital that we see. For instance, with the Webster Avenue rezoning and the 3rd Avenue rezoning.
Which you were part of, right?
Which I was a part of. You could transform everything from Bedford Park to Belmont, and Belmont in particular has those two corridors, 3rd Avenue and Webster. You could transform that into ground floor commercial, create over 100,000 or more square feet of commercial space to create new jobs, create new affordable and mixed income housing, which is a key to a stable neighborhood. If you design only one part, you are either going to get neighborhood blight or you're going to get gentrification. We need to strike a mix where we get urban renewal instead.
The area on Webster between Bedford Park and Fordham Road doing much better than it was, right? I mean, I think anybody who's been there before and after would have to say it's done well.
Development
right?
is starting to come up.
And this was, I assume, part of what you had wanted when you were in the community board.
So when I was on the community board, we took the Webster Avenue project and we didn't only think about expanding Webster Avenue, or upzoning Webster Avenue, we talked about neighborhood preservation. We talked about neighborhood preservation all the way up to Montefiore Hospital on Bainbridge Avenue, keeping mom and pop shops in place so that we didn't have overdevelopment, keeping housing, private 1 and 2 family housing in place so that you didn't have buildings going up to 10, 11 stories on very small streets. And we forced that, or we kind of redirected that to Webster Avenue. And by redirecting it onto Webster Avenue, which has a wider streets and it could include all sorts of bonuses for developers as well as opportunities for residents and businesses, it's a win-win. And I want to see that happen on Kingsbridge. I want to see that happen on Belmont, on Southern Boulevard if possible as well.
How do you, just back to this armory thing, which is,
Sure.
Many tentacles to the project. People are worried about the housing, that there would be gentrification in the housing, that once the neighborhood improves, or once something big and special happens, all of a sudden people who've been in the neighborhood are going to be gone. Can you stop that from happening, or is it just that's what has to happen in the natural order of things?
I think that there's a way that you could prevent overdevelopment, which would in some ways lead to gentrification. There are a number of houses just south of the Armory on Grant, Davidson, and Aqueduct, where if you downzone them and you kept them as 1 or 2 family houses, now you've created opportunities for the middle class to continue to thrive in the district. You're not going to sell a house for the same amount that you would sell a building, but you can have a home that can also be an investment.
So for you, the key in those cases would be downzoning.
Yes, you have to find the right mix. Do you upzone on Kingsbridge Road? What parts do you upzone, and if what parts do you downzone?
I know it's one of the things you're very passionate about is the idea of small businesses. We have so many other topics, and that clock is always ticking on us.
Sure.
But I do want to ask you about there are 2 huge malls coming to the Broadway in the 230s. 2 huge grocery stores, for example. There'll be BJ's, there'll be Aldi's, and who knows whatever else. Are you concerned that small businesses will be hurt, whether it be on Fordham, whether it be on Kingsbridge, even all the way down into Belmont, by these malls? And there's a new Target mall in the East Bronx. Does that concern you, or do you say, you know what, this is good development?
I think it's good development. I think it provides a lot of opportunities for surrounding stores to take advantage of foot traffic where possible. I also think that if merchants are not organized, and for instance in Throgs Neck they're starting to get more organized around the Target Mall issue, but here on Kingsbridge Road we have the Kingsbridge Road Merchant Association, which has been effective. People want to be able to shop at a small store, be able to walk in the neighborhood, and not just drive, park, and then come out. People want character, and I think that merchant associations in particular, and the bids, they bring character. Fordham Road has got an awesome bid where they have a holiday show, they provide opportunities for back to school. Those are things that we need to continue to support.
Let's talk education.
Sure.
Are you in favor of the state ed's Common Core standards?
I think that there are some parts of Common Core that need to be readjusted. I think that forcing a standard carte blanche on all kids is not fair. And I've heard this from teachers, from professional development experts. I've done some research on the Common Core. There was not one parent involved in the designing of Common Core. There was not one K-3 teacher involved in the designing of Common Core. Most of the people who designed Common Core were the same people who designed the test programs. So I think that there are some issues that need to be addressed. I think that we need to focus on individual performance and portfolios on students so that a test doesn't define them for the rest of their life. I've talked about this example. If we had Common Core where Albert Einstein was around, Albert Einstein failed for math, but he became one of the greatest physicists that we know about. So are we going to peg our children based on a test and based on a standard that is somewhat disconnected from the rest of our children?
Among the many issues that will come up, if you are elected, of course, in the Assembly is charter schools and the licensing of more of them. Do you want more charter schools? Are you going to be one of those that said this is a good invention, or are you going to be one of those that said, you know what, hold the line, we've done all we need to do?
I am in favor of charter schools, but not in public school buildings. I think that there's plenty of room for development, and that we should allow whatever model is going to work best for our kids and for our families to work. I'm not going to say that there's a one-size-fits-all solution to education. I'm a very big believer that some people might do things right, other people are going to do things wrong, and we have to try to correct those mistakes as quickly as possible when they prop up.
Part of your resume includes work in environmental justice.
Yes.
Assess for me kind of the environment. I mean, we all know what the city looks like. We all know what the Bronx looks like. We know what these neighborhoods look like. Assess for me environmental quality in the 78th Assembly District, and what kinds of things would you look at that, of course, would not only improve the health of the people who live there, but also the environment and over the long haul as far as climate change and all these other issues.
So, excuse me.
All right, take your time.
So, obviously, food access. Oh.
It's all right, take your time. That's why we brought the water, folks.
So, I'm very passionate about food access and how that affects or impacts on obesity and diabetes and the things that we can do. I've never been one to say or be proud of the fact that we have the least healthiest county in all of New York State. I think that we need to be much more aggressive when it comes to tackling health issues, and we need to use some ingenuity when it comes to that. How do we make it? How do we help, for instance, bodegas and smaller supermarkets compete with larger supermarkets so that they could bring fresher fruit and or produce that has
We only have a minute, so
Sure.
I'm just going to fill in with that question then, the logical question. So be ingenious. How do we do it, Mr. Candidate?
So, for instance, one program that I did when I was with the Department of Health was we created the Health Bucks program, and it was a program where we put access to food, to fresh food, to people in poorer communities, expanding programs like the Health Bucks, expanding farmers markets products, expanding opportunities so that people can get more physical fitness in their environment, changing the built environment so that people are doing more walking as opposed to doing more driving. Simple things like that, I think, can help with environmental justice issues.
Fernando Tirado, I do appreciate your being here. Unfortunately, your opponent decided not to be here. I certainly can't control what I can't control, but I know you agree with me when we urge all the people in the 78th Assembly District and all the districts to come out and vote on primary day.
Thank you very much. I want to say that this has been a team effort from a number of people, and I'm glad for the opportunity. I want to thank my wife, thank my friends and family. I want to thank the Northwest Bronx.
Well, you didn't
Democrats,
get elected yet, so let's not thank them all.
Well,
just
but
yet.
I'm thanking them for supporting me.
Fernando Tirado, thank you very much. And folks, if you have further comments or questions on anything you heard on tonight's show or anything going on in the Bronx, then you email them to us at bronxtalk@bronxnet.org, or you post them on our Facebook page, and we read them on the air during a future edition of our program. Also, we invite you to be a fan of Bronx Talk on Facebook. You can see the archives at bronxnet.org, and you check out the Bronx Talk link on the bottom right navigation bar. Next week should be interesting. All our shows are interesting. We'll present the third in our series of debates this summer, the candidates in the highly contentious 34th Senatorial District, featuring Senator Jeff Klein and challenger Oliver Coppell. They'll square off here on our program, and they both promise to be here, as a matter of fact. Our producer is Dalia Gonzalez. Thanks to Helen for pinch hitting today, and director is Shirley Arrieta. We'll see you next week.